welcome to video 2. In this video, we're going to talk about the 4 major wounds of the inner child. So what I would invite you to do is ask your inner child to step forward and allow them to share this space with us right now. When we go through these wounds, it's really helpful if they can pipe up and share with you, oh, that's what I'm feeling, or that's the one I'm experiencing. It'll help you connect to them a little bit more clearly, and also to notice any guidance or nudges or wisdom that they might bring through. So let's get started. The first one we're going to talk about is the wound of guilt. And this is that feeling of being sorry or feeling bad because you are asking for what you need, because you're taking up space, or even because you want to do something a little bit differently than somebody else. A lot of times, the way that this shows up in our adult life is we find it really hard to ask for things, and we don't like to put ourselves out there or inconvenience another person. So we can find it also hard to really set boundaries. And the reason for that is that if we are not made to feel like our needs are a priority, then we prioritize everybody else ahead of us. And so when we set a boundary, we actually feel guilty or we feel bad for taking care of ourselves first. Now, with this wound, a lot of times you will attract people into your life who will make you feel bad or make you feel guilty for advocating for yourself. And this can look like partners who, anytime you say, please don't do that, that doesn't feel good to me, or they say, oh, you're just being ridiculous, right? And they kind of cut you down. It could be in your parents, and anytime you say, I really struggled with that as a child, and you're trying to share with them your experience, and they're like, you're making too much of a big deal out of it. So there are many, many ways. Some can be very much in our face, some can be really subtle, but usually this sense of guilt stops us from being able to make ourselves a priority and advocate for ourselves. Now, the second wound here is the trust wound. So the trust wound shows up when we're afraid to get hurt. And we can be afraid to get hurt by others, and we can also be afraid to hurt ourselves. So with this wound, we can be taught as children that we do not get to trust ourselves, that we have to trust other people's opinions, their validation, their ideas, and their decisions above our own. And so it can make us doubt what it is that we actually intuitively know to be best for ourselves. And it can create this situation of not really knowing how to confidently and securely show up in our lives and make those decisions. Now, with this wound as well, we can a lot of times not feel safe. And the reason we don't feel safe is when we don't trust the world and other people in it, or we don't trust ourselves, there really isn't a safe space to land. Because we have to have that sense of trust in our lives and what's going on in order to feel like we are safe in the world itself. So when you carry this wound, you will tend to attract people who don't make you feel safe. They will be people that you kind of question if you can trust them, or you'll question if you can depend on them. You might even show up with your own patterns of self-sabotaging and not being able to trust yourself because you're so disconnected from that sense of intuition that would actually guide you in the best direction possible. Now, the third wound here is the abandonment wound. And this is one I think a lot of people have experienced. And the abandonment wound shows up when we feel left out or we're afraid of being alone. So this is that feeling of, I will not be okay if I'm by myself, or the sense of the fear of rejection or humiliation. It comes from experiences where we didn't feel accepted, we didn't feel loved, or we didn't feel like we belonged, or we had experiences where people actually left. Sometimes those experiences could be that they passed, and other times it could be that they actually left our lives. And it doesn't actually matter here if you knew those people or if it happened at an age where you wouldn't remember it, we would still sense it. And the reason I say that is if you had a parent who left at a very early age that you don't technically remember, you can still carry this sense of abandonment. Or if you had a family member who passed, like a grandparent, and you don't remember them because you were so young, it can still impact you, because even as a child, that inner child part of you remembers that sense of abandonment. Now, with this one, we tend to also see, and this happens for people who are very empathic, we see a lot of codependency, because what we learn is that we're not okay unless we're accepted or we're with other people. So it makes it hard to have that autonomy and that sense of being okay on our own. Now, with this one, we tend to actually attract emotionally unavailable people. So we create these cycles of constantly being abandoned because we are calling in people who cannot actually show up for us in that way. And again, it goes back to, we create these cycles because the inner child in us is still trying to understand and heal and resolve a past experience. So we will create it over and over and over again until we actually have clarity on it, get what we need, and we can move forward. Now, the next wound, the fourth wound, is the neglect wound. So this one shows up when we really struggle to let things go. We can have a really strong sense of not knowing who we are, low self-worth. We can get angry really quickly. And part of that is because when we think about neglect, our needs were not met, whether it was emotional, spiritual, physical, mental. And when those needs aren't met, we get this sense of anger in us because there starts to create this fear that it's going to happen again. And so frustration and anger are two that can show up as indicators of this particular wound, because in the past, something you needed, you didn't get, and you're afraid now that it's going to happen again, and you're really not sure if you could handle it again. Now, with the neglect wound, it can also create difficulty in being vulnerable, because you feel if you're vulnerable, you're going to get wounded. And again, it goes back to, my needs are not going to be met and something bad is going to happen to me. So with this wound, we really tend to attract people who do not appreciate you, who cannot see you or value you. And basically, we put ourselves in situations where our needs are being neglected over and over and over again. Sometimes it also shows up as us neglecting our own needs. So same thing here with like abandonment. We can abandon ourselves for other people. We can neglect ourselves because that's what we're feeling on the inside. And so when you look at these wounds, it's important to recognize that while this situation may have occurred, the wound may have occurred with somebody else, you can still be recreating it to yourself. You can be treating your own inner child in the same exact way because it hasn't been healed and resolved within you. And also because sometimes we need to create a model for how not to do that. We need to learn how to take care of our needs, and we need a healthy model so that we don't neglect our needs. We need to learn how to self-advocate so that we don't abandon ourselves and we don't feel left out. So it's really important to play with how these show up in your life, what your story is around them, and how they have been causing you to struggle this whole time. So with this, a couple of questions to tune into is, which do you feel like your inner child resonates with the most? I would start with one. You might have two, but notice which one feels like it's the strongest for you. And then when you tune into that, what made your inner child feel that way? Was it an experience? Was it a person? Was it you not understanding something or needing something that maybe you didn't even know how to ask for, so nobody could give you? And then how is it still showing up in your life now? So what is the impact of the inner child having that experience and you now still recreating that and playing it out? So take some time, sit with these. These are really big wounds. We can have layers and layers and layers of these. So what I would suggest is start with what seems most available to work on and to look at, and allow the rest, if there is more, to just kind of sit there for a minute while you focus in on this one area. All right, my friends, I will see you in the next video.